Hello and welcome to this edition of RFE RLive, a program in which we gather a group of experts to discuss issues for audience in our broadcast region, as well as policymakers, regional analysts in the media in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. This will be an informed and informal conversation, and we encourage you to participate by submitting your questions through Twitter and Facebook using hashtag RFE throughout the program. We are here today to discuss the forthcoming October 4 parliamentary elections in Kyrgyzstan. We are thrilled to have a highly expert panel, and our goal is to illuminate some of the critical issues that these elections rise. To discuss the subject matter at hand, I have Bruce Panier, who is on the road in Kyrgyzstan. Where are you, Bruce, today?
Today I'm in Osh.
Bruce is also editor of RFE's Central Asia blog called Kishlak Ovazi. Welcome, Bruce, to the show.
Thank you very much.
Also from Kyrgyzstan, one of the most active political names, Edil Baysalov, is joining us, who, among others, has served as a chief of presidential staff in Rosa Otunbayeva's interim administration. Edil, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting.
In Prague, I have my colleague, Venera Jumatayeva, the director of Kyrgyz service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Venera, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
From Washington, Eric McGlinchey is joining us, who is Associate Professor of Politics at George Mason University's School of Policy, Government and International Affairs. We also know Eric with his book called Chaos, Violence, Dynasty, Politics and Islam in Central Asia. Very nice to have you, Eric, in the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am Mohammed Tahir, Director of the Turkmen Service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, also host of the RFE's weekly Majlis, the podcast which looks at the pressing issues of the day in Central Asia. I am currently in Warsaw, attending the OSCE's annual Human Dimension Implementation meeting. So what a global gathering of minds and perspectives. And once more, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the show. And now I would like to start, Bruce Panier, with you. When it comes to election reporting from Central Asia, you are a veteran reporter. Very nice to have you on the ground. Few more days to go to the actual elections day. Please describe us the atmosphere on the ground and how different or similar is it compared to the previous elections that you have covered in Kyrgyzstan, Bruce?
Well, so far I've been spending most of my time down south. I mean, it's actually a very charged and electrified atmosphere down here. People are very excited about the upcoming elections. What I've been concentrating mostly on so far is trying to figure out what kind of access people have to candidates and parties and what kind of access the parties and candidates have to the people. And so far that's been pretty good. Now once you start to get a little more detailed about some of the questions you asked, then it gets a little more hazy, because I've been asking people what they know about various political parties, what parties they favor the most, and generally the answer I've gotten is while most people intend to vote, they still haven't really picked a party. Now, I don't know if that's what they're just telling me or if that's really where they are, but judging by what the people I've spoken with so far, there's still a lot of, it's still in the air for a lot of people as to which parties that they want to vote for. That said, there is a lot of activity by the parties down here, and I have seen several rallies being held, and they've had pretty good turnouts. So the parties are making their case in front of the electorate. They're trying to get their message through, because it appears that people are still trying to make the decision which party they're going to vote for. So it's very important, but I've been very encouraged by the fact that people are very enthusiastic about the process, and they all say that they're ready to go and vote.
Right. What are the main issues dominating the debate, and how different are they from the previous elections? Edil, you might wish to jump in here.
Well, first of all, I do want to state that I feel extremely proud, of course, that and actually a bit surprised, but it's a very good surprise. It's good news, and it's certainly setting a very high bar for the future elections, and maybe for the whole region. That I think for the first time we can see competitive elections, unhindered campaign throughout the country, and and it's very good news for the region and for Kyrgyzstan. But having said that, when it comes to issues, I would note that you know, they are not very much substantial debates. We're not you know, we don't see analysis of what happened for the 5 years. We don't see, certainly taboo is to touch you know, the to question the general course of politics in Kyrgyzstan, you know, when it comes to domestic policy, foreign affairs, and of course, you know, I'd like to say that for the fact that though it is quite competitive elections, we know for the fact that President Atambayev personally combed political party lists and excluded a few of his critics from running in the elections. So it could be, you know, half is glass full. We should be proud of it. It certainly sets a very high standard, but there is a way, you know, will it deliver results? Will democracy matter? You know, it remains a question.
Right. Venera, Edil says that issues discussed in the election are not substantial. I don't know whether you agree with that. If you, why is that?
I would say I see both encouraging and some very concerning moves during this election campaign. First, disappointment came to me and to many people in Kyrgyzstan with political parties' lists. We couldn't see really, really, let's say, progressive, most educated and most capable people in those lists. Many of them are led by very well-known politicians in Kyrgyzstan who so far couldn't take Kyrgyzstan into some big achievements. And so people were very disappointed with lists, first of all. Political culture is not that high, unfortunately. Still, political leaders, we don't know what principles are working when they make this list. People are thinking that, first of all, money is playing a big role in this process. And secondly, Kyrgyzstan is going to experiment with biometric registration vote. So people must register their fingerprints, photo, and signature. And it brought lots of problems. Like, we are expecting and very worried, everybody, about how technical part will work on election day, because just recently, last week, Deputy Prime Minister Tairbek Sarpashev wanted to demonstrate how biometric system works during election process, and the computer or technical stuff failed. It was shown on TV in front of all journalists. So everybody is worried how technical part will work. And secondly, the biometric registration demand brought another problem. Central Election Commission is saying that there are 2.7 million voters registered in Kyrgyzstan and abroad. So approximately the voters number should be 1 million higher. Where is this 1 million? So today we heard that only about little more than 10,000 voters registered in Russia. And where are the other ones? I understand that many thousands and thousands of Kyrgyz migrants in Russia, they are very much encouraged by Kremlin to take Russian passports, and many of them did already. They have already Russian passports, and many of them have pending applications for Russian passport. So that means they are very worried about giving their biometric data to Kyrgyz authorities. So we are missing here around 1 million people. Where they are? They will not be voting in this election. So such issues coming. It is good that Kyrgyzstan will realize that country is missing around 1 million people somewhere. And another issue that people are not only abroad but also in Kyrgyzstan were not able everywhere. Eligible people were not able to give their biometric data, not only because they didn't want, many of them, I mean, some people said they don't trust Kyrgyz authorities. They are worried that their biometric data will be used for some, let's say, undesirable purposes, etc. They will not be kept in confidential how it should be. And another part of people, we are covering that there are hundreds of shepherd's living in mountains or in remote villages. They were not able to come and to give their biometric data. So all these people will be lost in these elections.
Right. I see, Edel, you are shaking your head once Venera was talking about. So how do you see all these issues that Venera raised in her comment is going to play out in the outcome of the election?
Well, first of all, I do second Venera on many of her concerns. Certainly, disenfranchisement is not news for Kyrgyzstan, because even in the previous voter list setup, we had already 1 million voters missing, even without taking the very impressive campaign in a very short time, actually, that was to take all this biometric data from this, it's quite impressive, I have to say. And most certainly, this is very good news that for the first time, we all hope, of course, that this technology is not going to, is all going to function, because everything is hanging on these new technologies. But we all hope, and we know from the experience of countries like Mongolia, that these new technologies, actually, we have to thank the international community, European Union, United Nations, for coming up with $20 million in support of the purchase of such technology, that for the first time it will actually boost confidence in the result of elections. It will mean one voter, one vote, the principle. As for the disenfranchisement, of course, there's been quite, I think, a failure on part of some civil society organizations that have criticized this biometric data collection as something infringing or violating civil rights. And I certainly personally strongly disagree with that. On the issue of the foreign voters of our Kyrgyz citizens in Russia and elsewhere, I actually would politely disagree because it was an embarrassment that the previous regimes opened these polling stations at bazaars throughout Russia. You could see some obscure villages, and we know for the fact that both Askarakayev and Bakiev, they used several hundred thousands of votes from Russia, totally falsified them. And it, of course, violates right of our migrants elsewhere around the world. Why? There is no, constitutional lawyers will, of course, support me in saying that it doesn't matter how many voters are in certain city outside of a diplomatic office of our country, that, if you are opening polling stations in some distant Russian cities, you have to open, for example, a polling station in Prague, where we don't have an embassy, where we don't have a consulate, but where we have hundreds of our citizens. And that important principle was violated, and I actually upload amendments into lawmaking, into our laws that have limited voting only at the polling stations organized inside diplomatic premises of the Kyrgyz Republic.
Right. Bruce, I want to come back to you. It's clear that Edelin Venera has a different views in some of those issues so far being discussed. How widely are these subjects are discussed on the ground by the politicians that you are following today?
Well, I mean, of course, all these issues are up for discussion when we've been out there. I've heard these things in different places. People do tend to feel that money has played a big role in these elections. that the candidates that are on the party list, the higher up they are on the party list, it means the more money that they probably paid. Now, no one has any substantial evidence to back that up. It's the thought that people have that that's what's going on. What I would mention was there might be a small problem with local representation, or at least a perception of how they're being represented. When I was in Batken a couple days ago, I was with a youth group down there, and they made a point of explaining to me that there is no candidate from Batken, and remember this is the provincial capital, but there is no candidate from Batken district in the top 10 candidates of any party list. And they did have a candidate from a neighboring district that was in the top 10 of those lists. But so their question was, what are we going to be represented or not? And we know everything's based on party lists. So you assume that the top 10 are, of course, you have the best chance of getting a seat as candidate. And so they felt a little slighted in Batken that they didn't have anybody that was that high up on a list, and they didn't think they would get anyone as a representative in the end. But again, the thing about the money and how that plays a role in politics, I suppose that's a constant in any election. People couldn't say specifically who was doing it. There was just a general perception that that was the way it was going. If you were in the top 10 or top 20 on any party list, you must have paid somebody to get in there. So, there is that kind of feeling among the electorate down here.
Right. Yes, there are certainly many issues. Also, equally important is the program agenda, the election agenda of political parties or the candidates, which are going to play some role in the result of the election. And I was reading today some reports suggesting that the education, employment, development, and healthcare being the top on the election program of almost all parties. It seems all parties are mainly focused on local issues. Who wants to take this question? Is it correct?
It is correct, I would say. We couldn't even find real difference between political parties' programs. There are 14 parties running in this election. Mm-hmm. They are almost saying the same thing, similar stuff like we will raise salaries for teachers, doctors, we will raise stipendiums for students, we will build nice houses for these state employees, government employees, etc. And we really wanted to find out about their opinion about foreign policy, about international relations, and they were very, very reluctant to say something. And even like politicians like Tekebayev, Babanov, etc. They came to our bureau to give us an interview, and they said, everything depends on geopolitical situation. So we cannot decide by ourselves. I mean the politicians themselves. So it seems like they are very, very reluctant, very careful, very anxious about what they say about foreign policy.
Right. Obviously, you are going to come to the foreign policy subject, Venera, but before to go there. So if they are talking about almost the similar issues, so what are the points which makes parties differ from each other from the voters' point of view? Edel, you want to take this question?
It is, of course, I'd like to celebrate the ongoing elections, and actually I do want to hope that glass is more full. But as I said, with the lists being formed the way they are, and we have 95 members of the current 120 member parliament running in the elections, and it's of course by any standards it's a failure of accountability and basic principles of democracy when parties elected in 2005, and we know that there were 5 of them serving in the parliament, they almost totally changed their lists, and they all went into different parties. And where is the accountability, I have to ask? We have all the major political figures speaking on some platforms and on promises that they are going to deliver in the future, but no one is going to report and account for their actions for the past 5 years. And here I'd like to of course, you know, I think a lot about what our good friend Professor Maglinci, you have written about our country and
Right.
your criticism, and your, let's say, you're not pessimistic, but you are very sober analysis of what's going on. And I have to say, Eric, we see that, for example, during these elections, we see major failure or total catastrophe on the part of our media. You know, visit the page of our main news website, Aki Press. It's a total paid advertisement. These guys charge $20,000-$30,000 per each party, and each party gets unlimited propaganda. Paid of the news. They met here, they met there. Okay, they earning their money, but where is analysis? Where is media that explaining? Where is questioning, reminding? Where is comparing? You don't see it on part of our. Not a single newspaper, and thanks God, thank you American taxpayers that we have Radio Liberty here, that which is trying to fill the gap. But again, let's see at another institution which we had a lot of hopes for, our public television, the main channel. You have to watch the every evening news. You know, 3-minute segments, paid advertisement. Every political party films its rally, and they, you know, they even make their TV news anchors of the evening news on all channels, public and private. Just read such and such a party was praised by the thousands of enthusiastic voters who promised, you know, who celebrated, etc., etc. And of course, here we see that as professors of political science have foretold, democracy doesn't work without institutions. Free elections are not enough to make, you know, democratic, you know, to fulfill democratic promise. And of course, there are quite a few different more examples where we come short of this. But still, having said that, I do celebrate that we're having this unhindered campaign. I think it sets a very high standard for the next elections, and we certainly will take advantage of that. And of course, the day of elections, the new technologies will provide for the one voter, one vote, and that will increase confidence in the results of these elections.
Eric, Edil said, if you noticed, that you are pessimistic about this election. Is it the case? Why so? If it is the case?
If I understood Adil correctly, I think he was saying that I'm somewhat pessimistic about labeling Kyrgyzstan as a democracy, not necessarily pessimistic about this particular election. So you know, I think Adil raises a number of really good points. One thing I would like to stress, which I think is important and something that serves Kyrgyzstan well and something that Kyrgyzstan indeed should be praised for, is, you know, we've been lamenting the lack of party platforms, and I think that's correct. But at the same time, you have a lot of places where you have very, very sharply staked out party platforms, and those are reflective of almost immutable divides in society. So they could be based on ethnic lines, they could be based on religious lines. And those kinds of immutable divides are really difficult to overcome. And the fact that Kyrgyzstan doesn't have that, the fact that we are having such a hard time differentiating among these parties, suggests that there's a lot of cross-cutting cleavages in Kyrgyzstan, which is actually something that's quite conducive to stable democracy in the long run. So I think that is something that should be celebrated. At the same time, I think, you know, Adil's summary, and Veneer has been saying the same thing, is right, in that we've gone through many instances where there's been promises of democracy. Akayev promised democracy. Kiev promised parliamentary democracy. Now we have, you know, Kulov is championing parliamentary democracy. But we see the same kinds of patterns repeating themselves, the same kinds of institutional shortcomings that are meaning it's very hard for Kyrgyzstan to actually build democracy in practice. So it's a good step. And, you know, one thing we have to remind ourselves is if you just look a little bit north of Kyrgyzstan, we just saw a presidential election. where allegedly 96% of the population participated and 97% of the population voted for Nursultan Nazarbayev. The fact that we're not going to have the same kind of outcome here in Kyrgyzstan says a lot about how far Kyrgyzstan actually has gone. But yes, there's a long way to go, and I think it would be premature to label this a functioning democracy at this point.
Right, thank you, Eric. Dear viewers, you are watching RFE Live, and today we are discussing the upcoming elections in Kyrgyzstan. Please feel free to post your questions on Twitter and Facebook using hashtag RFE Live. So coming back to the subject, in our region, politics are mostly personality-driven issue. I believe Kyrgyzstan is not an exception. What people vote for to the one's program or the personality in this election? Bruce?
You know, that's going to be really hard to say. Everyone I've talked to so far named very local issues as what they were looking for candidates to solve. You know, that's problematic because it leaves the whole campaign process open to some kind of abuse. Candidates or activists can make very vague promises, and that will say a lot to these people. I can give you one example. I was down in Kyrgyzstan the other day, and I was speaking with some of the people in the town, and one woman said she'd vote for any party that would solve the border issue with Tajikistan. You know, now that's kind of concerning, because that means that based on a vague promise, they might actually vote for somebody that would, you know, say, sure, I'll solve the problem for you, when in fact you can't solve that problem very easily, if at all. So this is one of the issues that's really concerned me while I've been down here is, you know, again, most people say they haven't really picked a party yet. But the things that they're interested in, and admittedly, I'm in the South and I've been mostly in rural areas so far, you know, but what they really want is somebody who can solve their very specific issues, water, land, the border issue, things like that. You know, now I've seen these, like I said, I've seen these rallies where parties have gotten people to turn out. I'm not sure exactly what they're telling them, because usually I get shooed away after a while because my presence kind of distracts attention from the people that are speaking. You know, this is one of the big problems of the whole campaign is you know, people want something local, and I'm not sure what they're really tuning into when they think about parties or the candidates that are there, or when they're listening to activists. You know, do they see the bigger picture? Are they, you know, for instance, I've asked people, what about economic conditions down here? And then they'll go right back to the water issue or something, you know. And I mean, water is part of the economic issue. But, you know, they just settle on these one or two very localized issues as being of paramount importance to them, and that's what they want solved. They don't, you know, they're not thinking big politics about what should Kyrgyzstan's foreign policy be. You know, what is its domestic policy? What's its trade policy now that it's in the Eurasian Customs Union? You know, so there's those kind of issues up there, and what I'm really afraid of at the end of the day is that they have these high expectations that the candidates and the parties will be able to solve their problems, when in fact, as I said, a lot of these problems are not easy to solve if it's even possible to solve them. So I have a feeling, as much as there's enthusiasm for the election right now and the campaign process, that after the election there's going to be a lot of disappointment that the things they thought were going to happen or the things that they were promised are not going to happen.
Right, Bruce, you raised an interesting question. Adil, I want to come to you here. How aligned is the programs of the candidates with the expectation, hope of the people? As Bruce mentioned, everyone has different hopes and everyone different expectations. How aligned is this, the program and the people's expectations?
Well, I'd like to second Bruce on his observations. You know, there is this feeling, I'm not sure if it is true or not, but there is this feeling shared by all political parties in the running that somewhat the nation is jaded by politics. People are disillusioned. People are quite cynical. And so if you look at the political advertising and the campaign messages, you can see quite a lot of parties praise the business success of their founders, of their leading members. And the message is, you know, we built important businesses. Most of them are brand name, you know, household names, and so we delivered for ourselves. we are very well-to-do. We created thousands of jobs, and we are going to do this. We are going to continue. They're not talking about what they are going to change in state politics, but basically, you could imagine them running for election of some CEO or some. There is no question. They're not discussing what certain aspects of our national politics or laws they're going to change. There are those words that, we are going to deliver this, we are going to deliver that. A lot of populism, and of course, it's quite disappointing and a bit disturbing, of course, to some extent, that we are not discussing issues of a real, or maybe long-term future, but most of the debate so far has been of quite local around local issues. We'll build this bridge. We'll do that. We'll allow this. That. And so yes, the campaign so far, but we have 2 more weeks remaining. So far, it leaves much to be desired. It's not related to the. It's not connected to the real political issues of the day, Muhammad.
Thank you, Edil. We still have several other issues to be touched. Let's move on. With all these problems that we have been talking about so far, when it comes to Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia, whether people vote for the personality, whether they vote for the program, contrary to the other countries in the region, the result of the election is clearly not predetermined. Correct, Winner?
Yes, I would be careful on saying which parties are going to win and what percentage, because it's not very clear, it's unpredictable. We remember in 2010, everybody, including President Atambayev, everybody was shocked by the results of the elections. And so Kyrgyzstan is really unpredictable in this term. And according to our surveys and vox pops we are conducting every day, people estimate almost equally the political leadership and programs of parties. So let's take Social Democratic Party,
Right.
is considered as President Atambayev's party. There is no real bright politician leading this party. Do you agree with me, Adil? So there is no really bright politician on top of this party.
Absolutely.
And there are some other parties where people know very well, respect leaders, etc. So we don't know how people will vote. And all parties, as Bruce said, they have the same conditions for campaigning. And there are very funny stories about, I heard on KTRK, first national TV channel, leader of one party called Kyrgyzstan, he was calculating how many vodka plants they have, their leaders have. And people were laughing and commenting, hey, be careful. Now we have lots of people who don't like vodka anymore. So it's just funny. And I mean, campaigning is the same for everybody. They are organizing concerts everywhere for people. It's fun. But we don't know what will be the real result. It's unpredictable.
Right, Winner, but it is unpredictable.
Muhammad, could I add to this for a second?
Sure, jump in.
So I just like to put one caveat to Vanira's observation. I would agree that elections are unpredictable when it comes to the parliament. The question that we should ask is, how important is the Kyrgyz parliament? Elections are predictable when it comes to the president of Kyrgyzstan. So we always know who's going to win the presidential elections in Kyrgyzstan. So it begs the question, in the very meaningful election up to the presidency, the outcome is more or less predetermined. In the election to the perhaps not so important parliament, then we do have competition. So it does raise the question, to what extent can we really say that this is an unpredictable outcome if all the power resides in the presidency?
Right. In line with what you are saying, Eric, is also some media reports are suggesting, even though it's a parliamentary election, some media are suggesting that the Atambayev's Social Democratic Party has a chance to come back to the administration with a huge number of seats in the parliament. Is it Bruce, is it your feeling, is it your understanding, looking into the trends and feelings of the people there on the ground?
You know, again, I mean, certainly the Social Democratic Party is as active down here as anybody. Their advertisements are everywhere. Every place that I've gone, people have mentioned that that activists or candidates from that party have shown up in their village, town, city, whatever. So I know that they're active. Now, also know that the SDPK thinks they're going to take 65 seats, which is, of course, the maximum that you can win. Based on what I've seen down here, I would doubt that they would get that much. You know, I'm not going to predict whether they'll get the majority of seats or not. Like I said, it's still pretty much up in the air down here. But for what it's worth, when I do ask who's been down and visited and what candidates or parties they've seen that have come down for agitation and campaigning purposes, that party does come up. Maybe not first in the list of the parties that they list, but it's always there. Whereas the rest of the parties, you kind of get a little mixture. Beer Bowl was here. Yes, Ottoman was down here, and those. But the SDPK seems to always be on the list that everyone mentions as someone that they've seen, or some of the literature that they have that they've received from somebody, or the spots that they've seen on television. So, you know, it's possible. It's possible. Again, I kind of tend to doubt, based on what I've seen down here in the south, that they'll actually get the maximum 65 seats. But I haven't been up north yet, so I'll have to see.
Right. You know, Dr. Tologenov of the American University of Central Asia, cited by EuroAsiaNet, saying that Atambayeva's chance is much higher simply because the party leader is also a president. And he is the only identifiable leader in the country. Being the party leader being a president is still a factor there, Adil, in the victory or the loss of the election.
Yes, I'd like to actually say that we shouldn't be surprised at all that the Social Democrats are going to emerge as a winner for several factors. You know, I wouldn't actually exaggerate the role of that Social Democrats have been a ruling party, or that the current president is a leader, because as was very important point by Venera, the Social Democrats are absolutely headless. The people who lead the list, they are not of the first scale leaders, and we are still very much in the unknown. Who is going to be the next president? Who is going to lead the Social Democrats? You know, of course, when they win, who is going to be the prime minister? As we know, the last three prime ministers, although nominated by the Social Democrats, didn't belong to the party. So, having said that, I'd like to point to you that in 2010, the Social Democrats received only 3,000 votes from Osh, our second largest city. And of course, most certainly they are going to do at least 5 or 10 times better than that. So the Social Democrats will return as #1. Everybody expects that. They will get maybe even 40 or 50 votes. Actually, also curiously, because thanks to them co-opting several young faces, including a star from your own station, even 2 of them. They are both Janar Akayev and Aida Kasamaliyeva have been most effective in canvassing the votes in the native Osh and Alai, especially among the youth. So that trick, the old trick of opting new faces, of forgetting the past, of not accounting for your previous activities, is working. But actually, I'd like to, when it comes to analysis, you know, we can predict that probably at least 6 parties will pass into the parliament, and it's bad news. It's bad news because the parliament will remain divided, and actually it will be of the same, almost 70%. You know, in the leadership, it will be the same nature as our current parliament, which has been, you know, absolutely weak, leaderless, voiceless, absolutely rubber-stamping institution the last 2-3 years. And this is bad news, because in divided parliament, of course, the president will continue to play a very strong leading role, especially given the fact that his Social Democrats are going to be close to majority. But there is one caveat. There is one caveat, and we celebrate the. We don't know yet who is going. You know, it's still full of surprises. That it may be that two political parties, it is Respublika and Birbol, if they gain enough votes to be close, you know, to be more or less considerable, that they can influence the policies and even personalities like our future prime minister and the key ministers to a very quite serious extent. You know, it's not whatever it is, our parliament, because it is so divided, because of the weak leadership from the side of the president doesn't really have the vision how he wants to live. He repeatedly says that he is leaving, and he's not much interested in the day-to-day operations of national politics. So this parliament can actually still deliver a few surprises, these elections.
Interesting perspective, Adil. But there is another aspect which makes political system of your country, Kyrgyzstan, different, is the frequently changing alliances ahead of the elections. Several prominent political figures have changed their loyalties. I think one or two political parties also merged. What role these kind of moves are expected to play in outcome of the election? Eric, you want to take this question?
Yeah, I'm an outsider, so I've been watching this with interest as well. For example, you know, I find it interesting that Rafsan Jayembekov has moved to a party that is in favor of the Eurasian Union. He's someone who's been known as very pro-Western. But I think what we're seeing in Kyrgyzstan is something similar to what you see in democratic elections elsewhere, in that people move to where the votes are. And so these strange alliances that we're seeing, businessmen and nationalists, you know, Jayembekov going to Kulov, this is something that, you know, this is an effort of people responding to the electorate and trying to get support. So in that sense, although it's surprising in politics, you know, the old phrase, politics makes strange bedfellows, this is representative of politicians who are trying to respond to what they perceive is the public sentiment.
Right. Venera, there's another issue that is important to discuss. When it comes to Kyrgyzstan, potential unrest in post-election has always been an issue. The fact that several high-ranking officials came out recently, in fact, threatening against any such move after the election. Do you see such a possibility to be repeated in this election too? Do you see any signals?
I personally don't see such scenario with any results of these parliamentary elections, because, as we said so far, politicians with different views and opinion, they are divided into all kind of different parties, and there are 14 political parties. Thanks God, because in 2010 we had 27 parties. Imagine what kind of long sheet of paper people had to keep in their hands and choose from that long list. Now we have 14 parties, and politicians are divided into, I don't know, as Eric just said, very pro-Western politicians joined most pro-Russian leader, Kulov's party, etc. We don't know what to expect from them. Personally, I don't see any big change in political course of the country. I don't expect, because unfortunately there is kind of stagnation, even people feel apathy.
There's one thing that Bruce said that actually makes me a little bit worried, so I'm glad that Venera, you don't see a threat, but Bruce was emphasizing how local these elections are, and that local concerns are driving the dialogue and the discourse. If you look at the revolution of 2005, if you look at the revolution of 2010, these revolutions or these uprisings didn't begin on the national stage, they began on a very local stage. So they began in 2005 in the south, in a village, and they began in 2010 in the northwest, in Talas, and then they came to the capital, and they began with very local grievances. So to the extent that Bruce's analysis is reflective that if what everybody is expecting is the satisfaction of local demands, if people perceive that they haven't gotten this satisfaction, one could imagine a situation where these simmer over the winter and then come to the surface in the spring.
No, general dissatisfaction, general disappointment is building up. It's there. There is, when you said that will help Social Democratic Party that they are connected to President Atambayev, I would say it can even disturb, because he's not that highly popular leader in Kyrgyzstan. And so the local problems, local issues, challenges they're building up. They're like coming up. People feel big dissatisfaction, especially people who live on bordering areas with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. The relations with these two neighboring countries are very bad right now. They were never in such bad position, never before. So it's building up, but I mean, right after parliamentary election, I don't expect people coming out and supporting some certain political leaders just because they didn't make it to the parliament.
Right. Bruce, we are talking about the local challenges, and you mentioned, obviously, in your comments. Is there a chance that these local grievances turn into a kind of national issue there in an election or post-election? It's been always in Kyrgyzstan that when people come out to the street and show their feelings. Do you see that kind of situation at this time?
Well, again, so far I've just been down in the south, but the problem that I see here is that people have been promised, or at least the expectations, as I mentioned, down there, are they going to resolve the border question with Uzbekistan and Tajikistan? Again, this is not an easy problem to solve, and it's not really just up to Kyrgyzstan's politicians to solve it. Same with the water issue. So I can see where a combination of the disappointment that these issues aren't solved quickly because they just can't be. If they're combined with a general feeling that somehow the election has been hijacked, or that there's been some kind of violations which are not being properly handled or something, that could generate the kind of discontent that we've just been speaking about, where their expectations aren't fulfilled, and in the meantime, all of a sudden they get the impression that the election was rigged, or in some way there was some kind of, again, violations that led to certain people getting in at the expense of other people who maybe could have solved these problems. So I think that's something that they're really going to have to watch out for, is that, and Kyrgyzstan has this kind of history too. Let's face it, after elections are over and after they count all the votes, someone is going to say it wasn't fair and we want to recount. It's just inevitable that that's going to happen. Now, how much that's going to resonate through the country among the electorate is going to be a big question, and that's where it becomes a problem. If people actually believe that's true, then we have a bad situation.
Right. Yeah. Let's wait and see how it develops. So let's get rolling. We still have some foreign policy issues to be tackled, and there are obviously arguments in both sides of the potential possible winner in upcoming election, and also views about the potential unrest. The fact that there are 14 political parties contesting, and at least several of them has a chance to make to the parliament. What's important is the nature of coalition, which will also have an effect with the direction the government will take, especially on foreign policy issues, as we discussed. Regardless of who is the winner, what changes are we expecting in international standing of the country, Edel Baysarov?
I think we finally having joined the Eurasian Union, and actually, the whole country has woken up and has seen that the miracles, the economic miracles, the promise that all our issues are going to be solved the day after we joined the Eurasian Union, has not fulfilled. And of course, it's a coincidence, but it's a very bad coincidence. It's actually a perfect storm for the economic crisis of sorts, which is brewing up because of the falling ruble and tenge, and all the related problems in the leading trading partners economies of our country. And of course, we can most certainly expect that the Kyrgyz som is going to fall, and fall sharply immediately after the elections. And of course, it is going to influence. I think this is going to be the main factor influencing the foreign policy of our next government, because mostly it will be dictated by the economic reasons. I think going to open up to China, because we cannot hold for any longer building that railroad to our next door neighbor. And for political reasons, only for political reasons, of the pressure of our some of our geopolitical friends, this railroad hasn't been built. And now we will have two railroads being built. One that is going to divide, to connect China with Tajikistan, and the most, which the one we've been discussing for 20 years now. The one that is going to connect into Uzbekistan, and most certainly in our mining sector, in our construction, on our building roads, infrastructure. I think we will come to the realization that it is going to be China, which has the resources, which has proven itself as the most reliable in terms of standing by our country throughout all these years. I think that's already the fact, but it will, after we have after most of Kyrgyzstan will be disillusioned with the Eurasian Union and with the failing Russian economy, it will be China which will loom large in the Kyrgyz politics.
Right. Political parties seem to think a little bit differently than what you say about the rule of China, or the people, how people view China from Kyrgyzstan. I don't know how inclusive is this, but there was a questionnaire conducted by an NGO called Coalition for Democracy and Civil Society. That questionnaire was conducted among the political parties in Kyrgyzstan. The result is very interesting when it comes to China. It says, let me see. This is obviously the opinions of political parties. That most of them seems not easy with the increasing role of China, or increasing role of the economic influence of China. In fact, they see it really a kind of dangerous for the country, while almost all other parties kind of favored growing Turkish influence in the country in terms of politics, culture, and social influence. It seems like I have to remind you that I'm not sure how inclusive is this, but this is the NGO which conducted this questionnaire, which says that most of the parties see increasing Chinese investment as a dangerous factor for Kyrgyzstan. What your reaction would be to that?
No, it's not a matter of liking or not liking.
The reality.
Our country needs international investment and needs it badly. And most certainly the West is not coming with foreign investment. The West is not coming. Russian investment, we see it's going to be very important, because the only cash right now which is infusing our economy is this Russian Kyrgyz development fund with $500 million, and we are going to see many projects, including on medium business level too. This is going to be a very important vehicle for Russian influence, and hopefully they are going to come up with the necessary money to complete the hydroelectric stations and that Gazprom is going to be able to expand into the infrastructure of retail gas networks that they are promised to build. But most certainly, China is already a factor, and maybe politically or emotionally, or in terms of the PR, we are not ready to consider them a factor. And thankfully, Chinese, they don't need us to like them. They are not here to be celebrated as a great world power or as a great they don't, I'm not going to be naming other big countries that come to Kyrgyzstan to celebrate themselves. I think China has proven itself that they are here and they are interested that we develop economically, and that we remain stable politically. This is only a fact that doesn't need to be answered or pointed in questionnaires. It's already a fact of life.
If I could just jump in.
Sure.
As I said before, I don't expect big changes in political course of the country, because I don't see some independent and really like progressive or some completely independently thinking or being able to speak independently politicians on top of this party's list. We will see almost the same game going on in the new parliament, and it will be maneuvered by the White House in Bishkek. People call White House also the president's office in Bishkek. It will be pretty easy to manipulate and make decisions in the parliament for the White House, because politicians are divided, and as we said, parties, there is no party having completely different or new or very interesting program which will be promising new course or new strategy for Kyrgyzstan's development. So from this point, I'm a little bit pessimistic rather than optimistic.
Right. Bruce, you wanted to jump in when we were talking about the Chinese, increasing Chinese investment, the way it's being viewed by the people, as Edil put out, and also by the political parties. I just want to mention here, Edil is talking about the reality on the ground, but then why is the political parties in Kyrgyzstan the ones who are expected to be in the parliament as a result of this upcoming election are seeing increasing investment of China in Kyrgyzstan as a dangerous factor? Because this is the result of a questionnaire put out by this NGO, which is conducted with the political parties there.
Yeah, and on this point, I just want to mention that I really think that the political parties are going to have to change their opinion if they're going to reach out to the voters on this. Now, I just went down to Batken. I've been on that road in the 1990s. I was on that road again as recently as 9 years ago. And when I drove down there, that road has been repaired and fixed. There was 3 different places along that road where I ran into Chinese workers and Kyrgyz workers repairing the road. It's in great shape in some places. No one else is going to do that. Russia's had more than 20 years to kind of help out with those kind of roads. Like I said, they were in miserable shape. It hurt to drive on those roads. They're smooth. They've blasted their way through hillsides to make this road as quick as possible. It's to standards of anything I've driven on in Europe or the United States. And like I said, no one else is going to put that kind of money in. So if you ask the people down in Batken province, is Chinese investment good for us? They're going to tell you yes, because they can get around now, whereas a few years ago, what was a 5-hour drive is now a 3-hour drive. So
here's another interesting outcome of this questionnaire. Eric, I want to come to you here. The NGO called Coalition for Democracy and Civil Society in Kyrgyzstan, and they conducted this questionnaire with the political parties here. And the other point, and the result of that NGO suggests, like, while 6 out of 8 major political parties say relations with Russia should be a priority. On the other hand, answer for the question on should Kyrgyzstan continue to accept US aid, most of the parties seems not against it. Only one party, that is Boton Kyrgyzstan, openly opposes such idea. How do you read this?
Well, this is encouraging because if you ask the population in Kyrgyzstan, the general population in Kyrgyzstan, what their views of the United States, I think those views have worsened considerably over the past 5 years. So I'm glad to hear that at least among the parties there's some perception for room. I think part of that may be the result of the considerable effort of USAID to work with parties in Kyrgyzstan. So in that sense, perhaps there's a legacy of goodwill, and some of the political elite understand that. But I think the broader point is that despite this somewhat positive finding of the survey that you're mentioning, more broadly, the United States has a lot of work to do, and I think the United States image has really taken a hit over the past few years, and hopefully there's a lot of constructive things that the United States can do. I think the perception right now in the United States is that for the past decade we've been concerned about geopolitics. That's understandable, that we've forgotten about Kyrgyzstan, the more substantive issues, and hopefully with this new ambassador and with the new administration, the United States can begin focusing on some of the things that are most concerned to Kyrgyz. And so I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I hope we begin to see that improvement in U.S. policy in the coming years.
Right. This is time is almost up. This is a brief opportunity for anyone who wants to add a final note in that discussion. Idil, I saw in several occasions you were shaking your head. Is there anything you want to add into the discussion?
Yes, I'd like to actually say that quite curiously, the US AID and USAID-funded organizations playing very important role in the current elections. NDI and IRI are traveling around the country, educating voters, training observers, election day observers, political party observers, and this fact is, being appreciated by all political parties, and we can say they are not being stopped by the authorities from participating, in support of elections. And quite curiously, you'll be surprised to learn that political debates, party debates on our main television channel are going to be sponsored by the U.S. government. They were sponsored 5 years ago, and I was quite surprised that the state television accepted such sponsorship, and it's quite prominent fact. So we can say that we're not discussing Kyrgyz-U.S. relationships, but we can see hope for that too. But I'd like to say that whatever it is, whatever parliament is in our country, every time new elections are held, and new elections are held in the way they are going to be held in our country, which is going to be free and fair, hopefully, the parliament will return with a very, very, very strong mandate. The president will be departing. It's a matter of fact. There is no way he's going to reverse on his promise to stand down from his post. That's, I can tell you, if he reverses his decision, and if he will say that with some way he is going to stay on after 2017, that will be the reason of a very serious disturbances in our country. But the new parliament is going to come. It's going to be made up from old faces, new faces, but it will have a very strong mandate. And Venera, I hope that even without good policies that we are hearing in this campaign, I believe that new government is going to be quite different from the last 3 governments. It will remind the first government that was formed after 2010, which will be a very populist in a very good meaning of the word. They will be freshly returned from the people, and they will act with confidence, appealing not to the president, but to the people. And that is going to be very good news for our democracy.
Right. Very, very strong words, Idil. Well, we also want to discuss the voting system and issues surrounding the ability of hundreds of thousands of immigrant workers in Russia. And they are important issues, obviously, and will have certainly an impact on the outcome of the election, but time is up. It was a fascinating debate. Thank you very much from Kyrgyzstan, Edil Baysala, former chief of the presidential administration under the former President Roza Atambayeva, Rus Panier, editor of Kishlak Awazi, a Central Asia blog at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, who is currently in Kyrgyzstan, in Osh, covering the election. From Prague, Vinera Jumatayeva, director of the Kyrgyz service at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and from Washington, Eric Meklinsky, associate professor of politics at George Mason University's School of Policy, Government, and International Affairs. Thank you very much for your time to participate in the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.